I'd just returned from a week of sales calls in a neighboring state. It had been a successful week, and I decided to give myself a day off, so I went home. Thursday evening, expecting to arrive late. My intention was to silently enter the house, get into bed, and surprise my wife of 19 years. I still felt the spark when I gazed at her. She was tall and graceful, with porcelain complexion and vibrant red hair. We met on the first day of classes at a local junior college. I was a just-returned Vietnam veteran, and she was 18 years old, starting college away from home for the first time at the age of 18. Ella was tall, slim, and full of energy. Her stunning wild red hair and her excitement drew me in. She was the type of girl that could captivate you with just her presence. I was a 23-year-old former Marine from Southeast Asia, standing 6 feet 5 inches and weighing 230 pounds. And it was love at first sight. After 19 years and 2 children, I was finally on my way home to my love. I was listening to my favorite radio station and enjoying an oldies tune from my college days. The lyrics always made me laugh. It had a lighthearted air, similar to the early rap tunes but with understandable lyrics. I could actually follow the first verses, which were quite humorous. It relates the story of a man who works hard every day, getting up early and driving into town. Shortly after he leaves, the milk truck arrives at his house, and the milkman enters with his wife, remaining there for a while. It's a funny tongue-in-cheek story, but ultimately, it's none of my concern. I called him aside one day and told him what had happened while he was away, and he answered, "Well, I guess that's true. But did you know we never run out of milk, cottage cheese, yogurt, ice cream, or any of the other Kiwi products?" I think he's making the best of difficult circumstances. I don't want to cause any problems. Can't you see he's only trying to make the best of a bad situation? I figured I would do the same thing if it were me. As I was walking down the street to my house, I noticed a car in my driveway. It was far beyond 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure what was going on. As I drew closer, I noticed the front door open. It was a full moon, a bright night. There were no lights on, yet I could still see clearly. I observed a man wearing dark slacks and a white shirt, kiss my wife, then skip down the stairs and around his car like Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly in an old dancing film from the 1940s. By this point, I had rolled to the curb and was only a few homes away from ours. I had turned my lights off. They must have been so preoccupied with each other that they missed my lights. To say I was surprised is an understatement. I was stunned. I had no idea that our marriage wasn't always rainbows and lollipops. I loved Ella unreservedly, and she reciprocated. I never imagined that this would happen to me. Many of the men I worked with in our sales organization had divorced due to infidelity or similar reasons. I sat there on the side of the street for about an hour after the automobile went away. I spotted the bathroom light. Come on. It was positioned in the back corner of our house, with a window facing the side and back. I watched Ella's shadow move around the bathroom. The light was on for a long time. I imagined she was having a shower before returning to bed. As I sat there looking at the light, I was trying to figure out what to do. I didn't have a clue. I knew, however, that I would never intentionally be timid or overly boastful for anyone. As I sat, a plan started to shape. I remembered the words of the song I had just heard. I was determined to make the best of difficult circumstances. I gently drove away, stopping at a little local motel on the opposite side of town. I decided to take my time and create a plan. I was furious and knew I had to get some revenge on the man. You see, the dude was my dirtbag ex-brother-in-law. He had married my wife's younger sister, Ginger. He had cheated on her repeatedly until she finally kicked him out. When he was married, he was constantly slinking around, trying to spy down blouses or up skirts on any and all ladies, regardless of their age. Now, my dearly cherished wife had always shown a strong distaste for him after he treated her sister with such contempt and managed to inveigle his way into her panties. I was going to have to find out. He was absolutely going to pay. Deep-seated anguish and long-term misery. No one, least of all him, could cheat me and get away with it. As I sat in my motel room, I considered a variety of situations, the most important of which was maximum payback and low risk. The thought of going to prison to let this numbnut feel my rage did not appeal to me in the least. Finally, morning came. I called my dearly cherished and informed her that I would be home early. I told her I expected to arrive about noon or so. She appeared delighted that we could spend the afternoon together and perhaps do something nice in the evening. I told her to plan whatever she wanted and we'd do it. My next call was to a Marine buddy from my time in Vietnam. I wanted to bounce some ideas off him and get his thoughts on how to properly exact my vengeance against numbnuts and my dearly cherished. Jerry was a decent guy who had a similar event happen to him shortly after returning home from Vietnam. He was imprisoned because he killed the man in the heat of passion and severely abused his wife without planning. He received a lenient sentence in the early 1970s. If it had happened today, he would very certainly be gone for good. When he got out, he began an interesting business. It was solely by referral, for lack of a better description. He became a fixer. Of course, everything was totally off the books and behind the radar. His tax-paying business was a landscaping company, which gave him plenty of time to accomplish other assignments. The landscaping company compensated him generously. The other business paid him extremely well. I'd sat with him on several occasions as he told me stories about his time in prison, what he'd learned, and who he'd met. He was able to have some of the severe things done through his contacts in prison, allowing the client to regain some sense of well-being now that his antagonist was no longer present. We agreed to meet for breakfast that very morning. I love when a plan comes together, and this one was coming together quickly. After calling my friend and scheduling a meeting, I had some free time. I sat there and reflected on the recent past, hoping to come up with an explanation that would have given me insight into what was going on with my wife. Things were not what I had expected based on what I had witnessed the night before. I was delighted, and I had always looked forward to returning to Los Angeles, after 1 week on the road. I used to travel for 2 weeks every month and had this thing with numb nuts. This has been going on for a while. Was it new? I would have to do some research to find out more. My objective was to receive compensation from numbnuts in Los Angeles. I reasonably believe what I witnessed was a goodnight kiss between lovers, after a nice evening together. The big issue was that she was married to me and he was divorced and a sleazeball. He got divorced precisely because he couldn't keep Johnson in his trousers. As I sat there, an awful mist of melancholy fell over me. Why me? What did I do? If L.A., I wanted something weird. What's the deal with numbnuts? What did he have that I didn't? Time will tell. My emotions seemed to continue to spiral downward. I prepared to leave and meet with Jerry. I got out of my car, and the tears began to fall. I am not typically an emotional person. I've always kept my emotions under tight control. I truly didn't anticipate it. My body began to quake, and tears just appeared to flow. I let out a yell of anguish, put my head against the steering wheel, and sat there crying. I felt as if my life was circling the drain and Los Angeles. She kept her hand on the lever to flush it all the way down. The meeting. When I walked into Denny's, Jerry was there waiting for me. As I slid into the booth, he extended his hand to shake. "Hello, Max. How are you?" he asked. "I feel like shit has warmed over. I apologize for having to phone you, but I need some guidance and aid, okay? Tell me everything about it." I went on to describe what I'd seen and how I felt at this point. It didn't take long because I didn't know much beyond what I'd seen and imagined as a result of it. "Jerry, those are the facts as I currently know them. I realize they are a little slim right now. With your aid, I aim to fill in the spaces. If what I believe is correct, I will take action and numb nuts in Los Angeles are not going to like the results of their affair. I'm having trouble accepting the idea that LA would cheat on me, especially given who it is and all her rhetoric about how he was such a jerk to her sister, Ginger. So what do you want to do? So that's why I phoned you. I believe that since you had first-hand personal experience with this type of situation, you could advise me on what to do. I honestly do not want them to die yet. My initial response was that they were guilty and needed to be punished quickly and decisively. That struck me in the first hour as I sat outside the house. I felt numb and hurt all at the same moment. My initial thoughts were something like this. Did I want to kill him? Yes. Did I desire Los Angeles? To feel as much pain as I did? Yes. Now that those two questions have been answered, what should you do next? That is why I phoned you. Just a few inquiries, Max. What's your immediate plan? Are you still going to go home at noon and act like everything is fine? Yes. That was my plan. Do you believe you can keep rein on your tongue and avoid confronting LA? Until you have additional information. Yeah, I think I can. And even if I can't, I'm guessing things will only escalate. I believe I can continue to act foolishly in love. I need to understand why. First, before I proceed with whatever the final resolution may be. Okay, Max, just promise to contact me if you feel like you're losing it and need to chat. In the meantime, I'll get a tail on your ex-brother-in-law and keep him under surveillance 24/7 until we acquire the information we need. Remember, after 19 years of marriage to Ella, you are going to have to put on your best show. She will notice anything unusual about your actions. She will most likely ask you about it, so prepare to respond to her with something reasonable. Perhaps you are concerned about a work-related issue. I sat there thinking about what Jerry had just said. He was correct. How was I going to confront her with a straight face or behave as if nothing was wrong? Max, I have to get going. I'll contact you as soon as I know anything, okay? Yes, sure, I kind of whispered to him, and he departed. Last night I believed I had everything sorted out. Now reality was setting in, and I had no idea how to deal with it. I sat there staring at my food, finally pushing it aside, uneaten. It was just about an hour till I was scheduled to return home to a joyful home and see the love of my life, the lady I had lived with for 19 years, and who had been the most important person in my life. I considered the girls, Aaron and Eve. 18 years ago, we had two lovely twin girls. They had now left to attend college. They had only gone for the fall semester 2 weeks prior. Thank heavens they were out of state, and maybe they wouldn't be drawn into what was to come. I got up and left the restaurant, making it to my car before the tears flowed again. I simply sat behind the vehicle, sobbing into my hands. Deep down, I knew I couldn't face her feeling the way I did just now. My skull needs to be screwed straight. How? I hadn't a clue. I didn't know who to turn to. I assumed Jerry would give me directions. All signed, sealed, and delivered. We never arrived there. He was just listening. And after he departed, I wasn't better off. I knew I needed to get myself together. I chose the coward's way out. Hello, Ella. I thought I should call you. Let you know I'm still in Illinois. As soon as I started the car this morning, it began to give me problems, and I had only driven a few kilometers before it stopped. I have it at a dealership and should know more later. I'll call you later once I know more. Max, do you want me to come fetch you? How far is it? No, it's okay. I'm sure they'll get it rectified immediately away. They haven't even brought it to a mechanic yet. I'll let you know as I learn more. After I hung up the phone, I drove to the other side of town and went for a walk in a park. I was leisurely going along the edge of a lake and came onto a bench. I sat down, and the ducks appeared almost immediately. They emerged from the water and waddled toward me. I was taken aback by their attention until I heard a voice behind me. You foolish ducks! He does not have any food for you. I apologize for being late. The bus fell past schedule. I have your food right here. With that, this white-haired older man sat next me, opened his sack, and began feeding the ducks bread crusts and chunks. They pushed forward until they all had a chuck and were attempting to bolt down dry. Some did, and then came back for more. Some brought theirs to the water and chewed them up as they soaked in the water. When they were finished, they immediately returned for more. I sat there and saw the entire production until the man ran out of bread. The ducks seemed to understand that there was no more food. They looked at me expectantly, and when nothing else was offered, they waddled off into the grass, probably seeking for bugs. Hello, I'm Leo. I suppose I've spoiled them. I come every day to feed them. As soon as I sit on this bench, they gather around. Sorry if this bothered you. Oh, there was no problem. It was scary at first, but it was enjoyable to see. You say you visit here every day. By the way, my name is Max. I extended my hand and he took it to shake. Yup, every day. If I didn't, they wouldn't be fed. I started it 2 years ago, shortly after my wife Doris died. After all, the family has left me alone. I just got on the bus and went around. When I spotted the park, I got off and strolled till I came across this bench. I sat down and one duck came out and began pecking at my shoe. I kept a package of saltine crackers in my coat pocket. I brought them out, cut them up, and fed them to the duck in small bits until they were gone. It was great. I had arrived feeling alone and lonely without Doris. After feeding the duck, I felt calm. I sat here all afternoon, watching the people and birds. After a time, I got up and walked home. The next morning, I took all of the leftover bread and buns from the funeral meal and boarded the bus, and I've been doing it ever since. Every day, in rain or shine. What brought you here, Max? Leo asked me about the following hour or two. I told Leo the story. He said nothing. When I ran down, he just listened calmly and sat in silence for a bit. I experienced a sense of relief. Leo eventually climbed to his feet. He struggled with his knees and had to push himself up from the bench seat with his hands. It was then that I noticed he had an artificial leg. I hurriedly stood to help him, but he shook it off and replied, No, that's fine. I am good now, sitting or standing. I'm okay. The transition between the two positions is what causes the most difficulty. If you decide to come tomorrow, I'd best head home. Max, bring some bread and let's feed the ducks together. Bye. I watched him walk away. I took a brief look at the water before returning my gaze. He was gone. He could not have gotten out of sight that soon. Where has he gone? When I left the park, I felt compelled to stop at a grocery store and buy several loaves of bread for tomorrow. Not sure why. I suppose I felt relaxed in his company. Also, I wanted to know if he had any thoughts regarding my situation. I turned off my phone and headed to the motel. I needed to unwind. As I laid in my bed, I felt the stress ease. I awoke around 4 the next morning after nearly 12 hours of sleep. I guess my body was so tight that I passed out. I felt rested. I got up and went through my normal morning routine. I signed into a website and read about the latest items in my preferred categories. I finished by 6 and headed out for breakfast while I was in the restaurant. I turned on my phone and discovered that I had 16 messages, all from Ella. They began calmly, but by the end were desperate, pleading with me to call her. I dialed her cell phone. I left her a message informing her that I had just fallen asleep and would notify her as soon as I knew how the car was coming. I may be stuck here all weekend. I felt like a heel lying to her. I guess it didn't bother me that much. She'd been lying to me for a while. I knew she'd be at work. Ella had never worked in her specialty after graduating from college. Her degree was in a dental hygiene program, and she had never looked for work. She had earned her way through by working at a little mom-and-pop breakfast grill and sandwich restaurant. She stayed exactly where she had been throughout college. Her typical shift now was from 6 a.m. until 2 p.m., when they closed. Her weekly checks were always sent directly into our account, and she kept her tips to use as she pleased. She must have made considerable money throughout the years because she was constantly buying extras for the house or the girls. She would sometimes organize a vacation and take us along. She had never expressed an interest in the day-to-day operations of the household, such as house payments, utilities, etc. She'd always left that to me. She didn't even have access to the house account, so I didn't feel the need to rush around and defend myself from her robbing the accounts and altering the insurance. I checked my watch and discovered it was almost exactly the same time I had one of the park yesterday. I decided to leave early. I drove to the park and walked to the bench where I had met Leo yesterday. I no longer sat and glanced around. I saw no one nearby. I began to unwrap my sack of bread when I heard a step behind me. "Good morning, Max." "How are you doing this morning?" I heard Leo ask me. I turned to face the sound of his voice and saw him standing at the opposite end of the bench. He extended his hand, and we shook hands. He eased himself gently onto the bench seat before I had a chance to respond. He turned to me and commented, "You look rested this morning. You must have slept well last night." "How is Ella?" he asked me. "I truly don't know. I assume she is fine. She had been desperately attempting to phone me all night and early this morning. I had my phone turned off, so she couldn't reach me. Her last call appeared frantic. I couldn't force myself to speak to her." "I understand how you must be feeling," he added. He opened his sack, and the ducks began to arrive almost immediately. Some flew in, and I could see others paddling as hard as they could to be the first in line for food. It was nearly funny to see. We started feeding them. I was looking down at the path, where all the ducks were pushing and shoving each other for the most food. Leo seems to have a name for the majority of them. I heard Leo speak to them, calling them by name, and then he said, "Good morning, Clara. How are you doing this fine morning?" I looked to see who he was speaking with, and I noticed him stroking the neck and back of a massive white swan. "Max, this is Clara. She is a trumpeter swan. She was discovered wounded last year, and the DNR brought her here to share the lake with the ducks. She is too old to meet again. She must have lost her mate. Swans mate for life. If they lose their mate, many will never meet again." I sat and watched him feed the swans and ducks. Clara seemed to believe that she deserved preferential treatment. She would reach out for his hand and gingerly accept the provided piece of bread. As Leo fed the birds, he started talking. "Max, I thought long and hard about your position last night. I believe I may offer an interesting perspective for you. Doris and I had our own issues, but we were able to overcome them. We had been married for 40 years before she left home. You know, things are not always as they appear. Now, I don't question what you witnessed. I completely understand your response to what you witnessed. My concern is that you do not take action until you have all of the facts." Just then, my phone began to ring. I peeked through the window and saw Jerry. I responded. "Hello, Jerry. Morning, Max. I just left your residence, and all of the surveillance equipment is set up. We should learn more soon. Have you been home?" "No. I gave up and spent another night in the motel." "I completely understand," he responded. "I'll be in touch as soon as I have anything." Now it's Leo's story. Doris and I had been married for 7 or 8 years when a new neighbor moved in down the street. We were farmers, and he had recently bought the house and buildings from the estate of our oldest neighbor who had died the previous fall. He moved in about the 1st of May that year. We did as all farmers do. We went down to deliver him some of Doris's superb home cooking and a delicious rhubarb pie, fresh from the oven. His name was Harold. He was a handsome young man. He began being courteous and helpful to Doris. He was approximately 10 years younger than us and exuded confidence in himself. He kept paying Doris all kinds of attention while ignoring me as if I didn't exist. He assisted her in settling into her seat at the table. He fawned over her. Now I will grant that this young man's conduct appeared completely innocent when taken at face value. To me, he seemed smarmy. I decided it was best if we cut our visit short and get Doris out of there. She seemed irritated that I forced her leave before she was ready. She thought I was disrespectful. Honestly, I didn't care. I just wanted them separated. I decided to be on my alert for a bit. I did not want a snake to creep into my hen house. I definitely did not want him going after my hen. It was spring, and I needed to spend long hours on the field. Sometimes I would be behind the hill, out of sight of my home. One day, a week or two later, I was on the far side of the hill, almost as far as I could get from my home, when I noticed a plume of dust on the horizon from the direction of the road. We now resided at the dead end of the road. Normally, we didn't get drop-in visitors. Most of the neighbors who wanted to see me would drive along the property's edge roads, and when they saw me, they would park on the road or drive into the field and come over to where I was working to visit. Doris held a weekly wives' club with some of the local neighbor spouses on Thursdays, but it happened to be Tuesday. I decided to see who had visited the house. I got off the old John Deere and let her sit there, idling. Now a farmer would see it was just idle. Someone who was not raised around John Deere would not know the difference between pulling and idle. I took a detour through the paddock and approached the house from behind. I looked through the kitchen window and saw old Slither himself from down the road. He was tumbling all over Doris as she attempted to offer him coffee and pie. She was raving over all of his special attention to her. Doris was a born and raised farm girl who was unaccustomed to the city's flair, attention, and accolades. He was giving her a shower. He was clearly polished with his comments, and she appeared to relish the flattery. As I noticed, he stood up to assist her with the dishes. Standing close behind her, his presence caught her off guard, and she stiffened slightly, unsure how to respond to the unexpected proximity. "Oh, Harold, don't do that. You're aware that I am married, something Leo would not approve of." "Well, Leo is not here." "You liked it, right?" Doris was flustered. I'm sure she didn't know how to deal with this level of pressure from a man she hardly knew. Now I was furious. I almost went in and challenged him about his behavior. I reasoned that it wasn't Doris's fault. Oh, Slither was a master in corrupting ladies. Well, I must tell you that I had vowed that Doris would not be the next lady he corrupted. I slipped around the house and wedged the nail into his rear tire. So when he backed up, he would simply drive it into the tire. I imagined I'd just cause him a little inconvenience. His tire was unlikely to deflate completely before he arrived home. Then I rushed up the front stairs and into the home. "Doris." "Whose truck is out there?" I yelled loudly. Doris hurried into the parlor after I heard some chairs shift and move around in the kitchen. "Leo, what are you doing so soon? I did not expect to see you till supper time." "Oh. Sam came by for a visit and gave me a ride around the road so I could buy some ice water to take back out. It's scorching out there." "So, whose truck is that?" "That's Harold's." He had just stopped over to return the picnic basket and to tell how much he enjoyed the rhubarb pie. Harold stepped out of the kitchen around that time, said goodbye to Doris, and simply nodded at me. Over the next few days, I was never far from the house, and Doris and Slither paid visits every couple of days. Problem was, I was constantly nearby. I'll be darned if he had a chance to feel up. It's my wife again. I was becoming really bored of this. There is a hole in his shenanigans. It was about time I taught him how to keep the house. I paid him a few of trips at midnight and got into some mischief with old Harold. I had caught a large old bull snake and placed him in a sack. I slipped him into the cab of Harold's truck. Now farmers would recognize the snake and not be concerned. Bull snakes have the unsettling characteristic of rising up like a rattler and buzzing their tail. Most city dwellers have never come into contact with a large snake. When confronted with one, they nearly crap their pants because they mistook it for a rattler. Of course, they do not have rattles. But who's going to look closely when one is right in your face as you open the truck door? I wish I could have been a fly in the truck's cab when Harold opened the door. That would certainly be something to behold. I giggled all the way home the second time I went there. I simply let the air out of all of his tires. I had hoped he would understand that someone was furious with him. I suppose it was not to be. He must have been overconfident and desirous of my wife. There was no way I was going to let that happen. A week passed, and he returned twice, both times assuming I had gone to town or the fields. I'm sure he got weary of my turning up just as he was about to put on the moves. Doris. You have to remember that Doris was quite naive. I was her sole lover. She had been a virgin when she came into my bed. I had some experience in Korea when I went there with the army in 1950. I recognized a snake when I saw it. I finally decided to grab the snake by the tail and drive down the road to Harold's property. As I came to a halt, Harold emerged from the house. He made no pretense of being polite. He knew I didn't like him, and he didn't like me. The problem was that he showed no regard for me. He thought he was superior and smarter. Of course, he was young. What do you want, Leo? He spoke to me with a smarmy expression on his face and a curl to his lip. So, Harold, old pal, I want you to keep away from my house and my wife. What if I didn't? What will you do about it, old man? You've received your one warning. Don't come to my house again. There's an ancient adage in the country that you shouldn't mess with bull. You received the horn. You only remember that I got back into my truck and headed home. Did I believe he would remain away? No. He was simply too self-absorbed to do the sensible thing. I'd challenged him, and he wanted to win the award. Hello, Doris. That was simply not going to happen. Not if I had something to say the next day. I was out in the field working on stumps along a fence row. Some had to be dug out using the loader bucket from my JD 730 diesel. This was a large, powerful tractor in its day. I could easily dig out a decent-sized stump around 11:30. As I came over the hill from the field, I decided to take a lunch break. I noticed Harold's pickup rushing along the road. When I arrived at the house, Doris was hot and nervous. She couldn't seem to find anywhere to put her hands. She was constantly fluttering them over her face and adjusting her garment around the bodice. I just walked into the house and pretended not to notice anything. She felt humiliated about being almost caught. I don't believe anything significant had occurred. They simply hadn't got enough time. Doris placed lunch on the table, and we sat down. Honey, how is the fence coming along? Oh, it's going fine. I'll need to run into town after lunch to get some posts. Do you want to come along? I also need to acquire some additional items from the feed store. I'd love to. I could purchase some groceries and then stop by the narcotics store to get my prescription filled. It's been a while since we went to town. Will you spend a long time in the feed store? Nah, it will only take an hour or two to fix all of the world's issues and forecast the exact quantity of rain and crop size for the coming fall, with all of the elderly retired farmers who hang out there. We drove to town, and I dropped Doris off at the grocery shop, promising to meet her at the narcotics store and treat her to an ice cream soda. She giggled at that. I went to the feed store and purchased a dozen wood posts and a pair of large Olu corner posts. These were huge objects. Normally, I had to use the loader to lift them above the hole and drop them in. I received a roll of woven wire and a couple of rolls of barbed wire. I also obtained a few items from the animal health file. I met Doris at the narcotics store, and we drank sodas before heading home. As we arrived at home, I grabbed her hand and kissed her, telling her how much I loved her. She became a little ashamed. I love you, Leo. This was nice. We should travel into town more often. I'm going to run this stuff to the pasture and unload it. I'll be back early. Perhaps we can take a bath and scrub each other's backs as we used to. How would you respond to it, hon? Oh, Leo, that'd be nice. I'll throw a roast in the oven so we can eat later. That way we can take our time and enjoy our bath. Hurry back. I believe I almost broke a land speed record when driving out to the field and unloading that items. All save one thing. I stored it in the truck. We had a wonderful bath and never ate that roast. I suppose I'll have cold roast beef sandwiches for lunch for the next week. Okay, it may be tuna fish. Yuck. I'd already taken the fish course at the Y. It was also a nicely cleaned fish. Tasted wonderful. Doris had been screwed hard. I was exhausted, but I still had a long way to go before I could sleep tonight. I didn't have to worry about Doris waking up while I was gone. It has long been my practice to wake up in the middle of the night and go out to check on the livestock. It was just something my father and grandfather had always done. And I did too. I took my tool out of the truck. I chose to walk. I'd been walking and running these roads and fields all day and night since I was 5 years old. Grandpa, Dad, and I would often go coon hunting on a clear, starry night like this. I could see well at night. I knew all of the shortcuts. It did not take me long to go at Harold's. I entered the back door. Back then, no one locked the back door. I did not strive to be silent. I went directly toward his bedroom. I turned on the light and prodded him in the foot, instructing him to get up. He attempted to get out of bed and challenge me, but he was unprepared for my instrument. You see, at the feed store, I purchased the best electric cow prod. As he approached, I went forward to give him a swift jolt. You'd think I had shocked him. He yelped, coiled up, and whined like a kid. I moved closer and gave him another rapid zap, and he went straight up into the air, nearly to his feet. Harold, you chicken, I've turned it down for usage on little items. If you don't stop whining, I'll turn it up to the bull setting and test your ability to fly without wings. Get dressed now, you sad piece of trash. I instructed you to stay away from my wife. But you didn't, so you will now have to suffer the consequences of your disobedience. I made him walk out into the kitchen before hitting him again with the prod. He fell like a bag of wet cement when he was down. I wrapped a pair of lovely slip knots around his wrists and secured them behind his back. I held him up, jabbed him again, and then led him out the door. Once he was outside, I zapped him hard enough to knock him to the ground. I placed a loop of barbed wire around his shoulders before wrapping him from neck to knees. It must have been quite painful. I helped him up and led him across the fields with gestures and prods from his rear gate. He kept trying to hop because it was difficult to walk with only his legs free from the knee down. It was okay. I was in no hurry. I knew where we were going. Harold, unfortunately, did not. He had tried to pursue the wrong woman. After a while, we approached my property. We were far out in my back pasture. We quickly arrived at the location where I had been fencing. I stopped him and asked him to turn around and face me. He did. It was difficult since he was standing in soft soil after drilling a post hole. I utilized my father's 22-inch power auger to dig the large holes required for the corner posts. I wanted the corner posts to be well set, so I used an auger extension and dug holes about 8 feet deep. I approached him with the prod extended. I was not going to touch him again. I only wanted to point out his mistakes. He must have assumed I was going to hit him again, and when I approached, he hopped back. He disappeared all of a sudden. I looked around. I could not see him. I assumed he had run away. I did hear some mewling and the occasional moan. We're not sure what was causing them. Oh well. It was a fantastic night. I stood there enjoying the night. I gazed at the large, old corner post hanging from the loader's raise arms. I decided to go ahead and get it set. That way, I'd get a solid start for tomorrow on installing the fence. I climbed on the tractor, started it, moved it about a foot forward, and then hit the release lever. The post dropped into the hole with a pleasant thump. I went down and began backfilling the hole with a shovel. When everything was carefully packed, I went home. A few days later, Doris noted that she hadn't seen Harold in a while. I suggested she bake him a pie and take it over to him to see if he was okay. Later, I watched her pull out in our truck heading toward Harold's. She returned very fast. She said he wasn't at home. She said that she had left the pie for him on the back step. She suspected he had gone off with someone because his pickup was in the yard. I assured her that everything was fine. He'd show up sooner or later. "Honey, how about we go for a run to town and get another soda? What are your thoughts?" She came to me. I threw my arms around her and kissed her deeply, and I helped her get into the truck. Yep, it was going to be an enjoyable summer. "Will I see Max tomorrow?" "Yes." "I will be here," I told him. Leo shuffled off. I was left with just my thoughts and half an inch of duck crap around my feet. You've heard the old adage about stepping into shit and come out smelling like roses. I was in the shit now, literally and figuratively. Now I only had to find out how to leave smelling like a rose. I guess I'm the only one who is experiencing anguish and suffering right now. It seems like a great deal of time had gone since my disastrous decision to take a well-deserved day off at the end of a successful sales trip. I sat up with my shoelaces and duck crap. I was not any smarter than when I discovered my beloved wife's romance with numbnuts. I was still having trouble wrapping my mind around it. It simply didn't seem real. Could it be just Saturday morning? Could it be 24 hours since my life began and Happy Home had already begun to deteriorate? I'm sure Ella was frantic trying to contact me. I think I should call her and explain that I was stuck at the motel in Illinois, make an explanation for the car not being fixed, and that I would have to wait until Monday for the necessary repairs to be completed. I didn't want to relieve her concern, but I wasn't sure what to do until I heard more from Jerry. My first inclination was motivated by my personality and training. I just wanted to confront him directly. To hell with the consequences. Let the chips fall wherever they darn well pleased. I only wanted the suffering to stop. I've never felt such emotional pain in my life. I knew deep inside that if I went right at them, the suffering would never stop. It would intensify. I guess my only option was to wait for additional information. I started walking toward my car, and my phone rang just as I arrived. "Hello, Jerry," I said, viewing the caller ID on the phone's screen. "Morning, Max. How are you? I have some information for you. I'm not sure what to make of it yet. It seems strange. Can we meet for coffee? Is it the same place?" "Sure. I will meet you there in around 15 minutes, I told him. We both got to Denny's at the same time. We strolled in together and took a booth away from the other diners. We ordered coffee and waited to be served before proceeding. We've had the house under surveillance for 24 hours and followed Ella every time she walked outside. We monitor her cell and home phone. In that time, she has only gone to the grocery store and attempted to phone you roughly 24 times. Those calls all went to voicemail. Yeah, I understand. She received a call from your ex-brother-in-law as I held up my phone. He wanted to meet with her this following Monday, after you, one of the offices. She informed him she couldn't and would never meet him again. Then he threatened her that if she did not meet with him, he would inform your daughters that she was cheating. 304. He claimed he had proof that she was cheating on her father with a man from the diner where she works. Evidently, he witnessed her leaving the Hilton Hotel with a strange man and made his own conclusions. He apparently called her about it on Wednesday and then threatened her. I have everything on tape, he said, sliding a small cassette tape player across the table to me. I'm not sure what they did based on what you witnessed. It might have been practically anything. She did assure him that it would never happen again and that he could eat shit and die. He threatened her again, demanding that she meet with him. She hung up with him. We have full audio coverage throughout the house. We could hear her sobbing after hanging up the phone. He attempted to call her back multiple times. He also drove by and went to the door late yesterday night because he didn't see your car in the driveway. He hammered on the door and yelled at her. We also have video of that. Are you saying that you don't believe Ella was a voluntary participant in what I witnessed last Friday morning? So far, what I've heard and seen bears all the hallmarks of a troubled black male. He said, Max, could you let me run with this for another day or so? I believe I have a way to find out what he is truly up to. Well, I was ready to contact her and tell her I was trapped and wouldn't be able to get home until Monday due to car troubles. I suppose I could still do that and let you work on it. Will that work? I asked him. Yes, I will put my finest people on it, and we will see what happens. I will get back to you as soon as I have anything fresh. Would you want the video as well? How about right now? No, I'll simply listen to the audio tape for now. Okay, Max, I will chat to you soon. I sat there reflecting on what he had told me. I decided to return to the motel and listen to the tape. I contacted Ella on my way back to the motel. Hello, Ella. I apologize for not returning your calls. I didn't realize I'd left my phone at the dealership when I left, and I hadn't gotten it back until now. They can't even begin repairing the car until Monday, since the parts have to be trucked in. Of course, the service department will not be open again until Monday. Honey, why don't I come over and we can spend Sunday together, and then we'll go back home on Monday once they finish with the car? No, that is okay. It's just one more day, and I should be home by Monday evening. Thank you, Max. I genuinely want to be with you. I was starting to grow annoyed with her. I didn't want to be confined in a motel with her for the night, with no answers to my queries. Besides, I was not in Illinois. I was only across town from her. I didn't want to explain it yet. Ella. It's okay. I can survive another day alone. It isn't like we've never been separated. I could hear a quiet sob coming from her end of the line. I felt like a heel and a shit all at once. I had it everything. When it came to matters between the two of us, our marriage was never able to resist Ella. I guess she was simply feeling guilty. And I was feeling good about being able to turn the pain around on her. For now, I'm hoping it doesn't come back to bite me in the buttocks. Max, please, I do not want to be alone this weekend. Can you rent a car and return home? Yes, I probably could. I am simply not going to. I'll see you later Monday. Bye, Ella. I love you, she said. I didn't respond. I could hear quiet crying on her end. Then I ended the call. I didn't feel right making her weep. In our entire marriage, I had never knowingly made her weep. I didn't feel good about myself at all. I drove towards the park. I stopped to get bread for the ducks and Clara. Leo went onto the sidewalk around 100 yards away from the bench as I was approaching there. Some of the ducks saw him and began paddling furiously to reach the bench area. Morning, Max. How was your night? He asked me. So? I did not sleep well at all. Couldn't stop thinking about the whole thing. This morning, I received some news from my friend who was babysitting her and numbnuts. Not enough to truly imply anything. I just remembered the tape player in my pocket. I pulled it out and sat on the bench. He handed me this to listen to. Would you like to listen to it with me? Sure, but first let's feed these tiny beggars. Then we will be left alone. We spent the next half hour feeding the ducks. Clara arrived just as the ducks were finishing their meal. She strolled along the sidewalk toward Leo. She paused near to his right knee and sat down. Her head was near to his elbow, and she rubbed the bottom of his arm. He clutched a slice of bread in his left hand, which she pecked at. He petted her head and neck simultaneously. She seemed to like the attention. He fed her 3 or 4 more pieces, and she stood up, walked into the water, sailed out a few yards, and began preening her feathers. I started the cassette player and listened to it in silence. It was pretty much as Jerry had said. It was clear that Ella was being blackmailed. I don't know why she let him do this to her. It seemed like there should be a straightforward explanation for what he witnessed. There had to be more to this, Max. I believe you've also got a snake in your henhouse. I've always believed that men should trample their own snakes. However, it is a little more difficult now than it was 30 or so years ago. I'm glad Doris never found out what actually happened to Harold. I will agree that life was a lot better without him slithering around. I wish I had a power auger. I'd plant him 10 feet down. The problem is that I don't own one and don't live on a farm, As soon as he disappeared, the police would be on his trail, and I would be one of the suspects. I've never been a good liar. They'd catch me sooner or later. I do not want to go to jail for him or Ella. Do you believe you could return to Ella if you knew he was gone and didn't know everything that happened between them? Could you just pretend nothing was wrong and carry on with your life? Leo inquired after the last few days. I'd really like to have my life back. My stomach is in knots from not knowing. I know I love her enough to forgive her. It would be preferable if she did not have to feel humiliated before telling me what was going on. Yeah, I guess I could live with the fact that the snake was gone for good, and with sufficient proof to conclude that what happened between them was solely the product of his blackmailing her. Max, are you willing to leave everything up to me? Leo asked me. Why are you willing to do it, Leo? Why would you take such a risk for me? It would be a little risk, though. Nobody knows. Nobody will ever know each other like we do. What if you got caught? Well, you should know that I have been thinking about it since you told me about your situation. Yeah. See, the risk to me is really low. Even if they caught me, the punishment would be meaningless. I would never make it to trial. Yes. I have terminal prostate cancer and will most likely die within the next 2 months. I started feeling bad a few months after Doris died. I simply never went in to get it checked until it was too late. They gave me 6 months, and 5 months ago, I am ready to leave. I want to see Doris without the morphine. I couldn't make it through the day. I couldn't believe I was considering the death of another person. Although my ex-brother-in-law was about as good as what you scrape off your shoe after a walk in the dog park, I must say he piqued my interest. How would you handle it? I asked him now. You now know. It is best to know as little as possible. That way you won't have to lie. Okay, you're most likely correct about it. Now, Max, as much as I like your company, don't come back here to feed the ducks. I shall greatly miss our conversations, but it would be preferable if you didn't meet me here anymore. You go home on Monday and try to act as if nothing is wrong. I will consider it a personal favor from you to do so. I enjoy the satisfaction of knowing that I have assisted a nice guy and woman. I'll merely help clean up the gene pool, right? It's a good thing this snake hasn't reproduced herself. That can only be a positive thing, Leo. I'm not sure what to say. This entire situation feels surreal. Here we are, scheming the death of another individual, although one of the lowest character. Surprisingly, my guilt isn't bothering me at all. Don't think about it anymore, Max. Simply tell me his name and where he lives, and I will get to work. Now you return to Los Angeles. Tomorrow. Make careful to leave the monitors and surveillance in place and don't tell your pal. That way, if there is a question, he can vouch for you and inform the powers that be. When you were in the house with Ella, I doubt it would come to that. But you can never tell. Now go have a happy life. Take care of Ella. I stood up, helped him to his feet, and shook hands. I drew him close, threw my arm around his shoulders, and gave him a wordless hug. I turned around and walked away. When I turned to look back, he was gone. It was as if he'd never been there. There were no ducks. Clara was gone. There was no duck feces on the sidewalk. I walked back. There were no crumbs. Nothing. There was no evidence that we had ever been there. I turned and went to my car. I'm not sure why, but I felt at ease. As I neared the park's edge, I discovered my path had brought me beyond the edge of one of the city's many grass gardens. On the edge there stood a massive rose bush. On the shrub was a lovely red rose with a long stem. It was a deep blood red and smelled fantastic. I looked down at the label. It was Mr. Lincoln. It was a showstopper despite the fact that it was autumn. I headed to a garden center and purchased a potted Mr. Lincoln to bring home with me tomorrow. I thought Ella would enjoy it. I thought it'd be wonderful if we planned it together. Meanwhile, Leo stomps on a snake. I drove down the street toward Max's ex-brother-in-law's house. He was outside washing his truck. It gave me an idea. I headed home to gather what I would need. Later in the evening, I returned and parked around the block. I walked around the block. I was holding a plastic bag of dog feces and a pooper scooper. I also had my trusty prod. I strolled carefully down the street towards his house. When I arrived at his house, his truck was parked in the garage with the door open to the street. I walked up the sidewalk and banged on his side door. He approached the door. "Say, I'm sorry for bothering you, young fella. I believe my dog ran into your backyard. Would you mind if I looked for her?" I showed him the poop bag and scooper. "Sure, go ahead. If she makes a mess, make sure to clean it. I do not want any landmines left in the yard." He laughed. "Sadie? Sadie. Come on, girl. I know you are hidden back here. Come out. I'm going to give you what you deserve when I catch you. You're a nasty girl for running off like that." I kept talking like that, like I expected to find her back in his yard. He had followed me back to the backyard. I paused just past the back wall of his garage. I stepped onto the grass and looked about. No Sadie. I turned to face him. It appears that she has kept going. She's probably already home. I said, "Do you live around here? If I see her, I will bring her home for you." "Yeah, I only reside around the block, down at the other end. Just moved in a few days ago. That would be very neighborly of you, young feller." "Say, that's a really great vehicle you have in the garage." "Which sort is it?" I asked. "This is a brand new Dodge Ram 3500 diesel. I plan to enter it in pulling competitions once I've finished modifying it. Come on, I will show it to you." We entered the garage's backside door. He pressed the button to close the large garage door and switch on the lights. It was a beautiful truck. It was vivid red, with the large door closed and all the lights turned on. It sat there, shining like a newly minted penny. "Isn't she pretty?" he asked me. She. Sure enough. I acknowledged as he aimed a beam toward his truck. I whacked him with a prod. I had it set to full. It knocked him off his feet. I took some tire wraps out of my pocket and tied his hands and feet. I waited for him to come around. When he woke up, he felt rather disoriented. I helped him get to his feet and had him climb into the rear of his pickup. He had one of those lovely fiberglass box lids with hinges. I released the lock and opened the tailgate. I had him sit on the tailgate. I duct taped his mouth closed. He tried to create some noise. I pointed the prod at him. He shut up. "Now listen, shithead. This is how it will proceed. I'll give you one chance to tell me the truth about what you've been doing with your ex-sister-in-law, Ella. If you lie to me, you'll die. Do you comprehend what I'm saying? Simply nod your head." I informed him, "If you understand me." He quickly nodded in the affirmative. "Now I am going to remove the tape, and you will tell me nothing but the truth. If I even suspect you were lying, it's finished and you won't have another chance. Am I making myself perfectly clear? Simply nod your head." I grabbed the tape and pulled hard. It must have stung since he let out a loud "shut up." "I don't want to hear from you again until you have an answer to a specific inquiry. Now, I have this tiny tape recorder. I'm not very good with these things. So you were going to sit up and talk very slowly and clearly, not leaving anything out? You have no idea how much I know about your shenanigans, so don't lie. I'll know if you do. Now, start going. Explain why you were attempting to blackmail Ella." He started in. It was the oddest case of contradicting misinformation you could conceive. In simply, he needed money, and he saw Max as a source of income through Ella. She served only as a conduit for the funds. In addition, he'd get to screw her. He hadn't screwed her yet. Thursday night and Friday morning marked his first attempt to persuade her to do what he desired. As he walked out the door, he grabbed her and dragged her out onto the porch, clamping a lip lock on her before she could get away. That is what Max saw as he was walking down the street. I switched off the recorder and asked him specific questions before turning it on and having him record his responses. When it was all over, he begged me to let him leave. "Listen, shithead, are you just plain stupid? You have just acknowledged to a crime. You're going to have to pay for that crime." I pulled out a syringe packed with enough animal tranquilizer to knock down a bull and shot him quickly before he could pull back. I stood there until he fell asleep, and when he began to fall off the tailgate, I grabbed him and pushed him into the box. I closed the tailgate and dropped the cover. It was past 10:30 a.m. I switched off the lights in the garage, went inside, and made sure the answering machine was turned off. Turned off the computer. I poured out the coffee pot. I got the pot ready for the next day's coffee, wiped down all of the surfaces with alcohol, collected all of the rags, then wiped down the floor with a damp mop. I locked the door and turned off all of the outdoor lights. I entered the garage, closed and secured the side door from the inside, and crawled inside the truck. I hit the garage door opener in my pickup and waited for it to open. I started the large truck, backed it out to the street, hit the door closer, and turned down the street. I allowed the big diesel to idle down the street. Didn't want to wake up the entire neighborhood. I examined the gasoline gauge and saw that it was full. That was good. We had a cruising range of 400 to 500 miles and no need to reload. I drove home and parked the truck in the garage. I loaded my Honda Goldwing into the back after I removed the box lid. I took my circular saw to the box cover and quickly cut it into little fragments suitable for burning. I'd have to have a marshmallow roast when I returned from my trip. I packed crap for brains into the back seat of the crew cab. I hit him with another tranquilizer shot and went back on the road. I was getting close to where I used to live, way out in the countryside. In another state. I still owned the farm. The cropland was rented out. I went out a few of weeks ago and did some earth moving with my old 9 cat, which I bought used 20 years ago. She was a sturdy old lady who could move dirt with the best of them. I had always wanted a pond for bass fishing, and a few years ago I began working on one. I had not gotten very far with it. Then Doris became ill. I hadn't completed the dike yet. I had just scooped out the bottom, and the stream was still running through it. I felt this morning was as good a time as any to finish it. That way, the relatives would have a spot to go fishing, as soon as the sun rose. I fired up old Gertie the cat and began cutting a deep cut across the stream to get down into the clay and create a deep clay slug to prevent the water from cutting under the dike. I cut down around 15 feet and figured that would be enough. I drove the pickup over the side, dismounted my bike, and then went on to the Gertie to push the truck into the cut. I backfilled the cut with clay and began pushing back and forth down into it to pack it solidly. I must have drove through there around 20 or 30 times before I was confident that I had a strong, solid base. Then I erected my dike. It would most likely take several years for the pond to fill. It was going to back up around 6 to 7 acres of water. I was upset that I wouldn't be able to watch it. I'd spent the day and felt accomplished. It had been a good day. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be around to stop a few more snakes. Everywhere you turned, there appeared to be an abundance of them. I got on my bike and headed home. I was prepared to be with Doris. Meanwhile, Max. I went home on Monday and tried to act as if everything was normal. Ella raced up to me and I gently held her against me. She sobbed in my arms. "Oh, Max, I really missed you. Please take me to bed and make love right now." I had promised Leo that I would look after Ella even though I had no idea what was going on. Furthermore, I promised myself that I would love and care for her. I just trusted Leo to take care of the matter. I took her by the hand and led her to the bedroom, then into the bathroom. I turned on our large jetted corner jacuzzi tub and let it fill. We had always enjoyed sitting in the tub together and relaxing. She'd sit between my legs, leaning back against my chest. I'd wash her and caress her while the tub filled. I turned to her and began undressing her. I was amazed at how little she had changed from the long-legged, long-armed, red-headed beauty I had fell in love with. Her hair had the lovely color of freshly grated carrots. It never stopped exciting me. When I saw her, her complexion was a stunning pure white with a faint sprinkling of small freckles. I liked to join the dots with my tongue. I knew exactly where each one was hiding. Ella appeared anxious and uneasy. I stood behind her, gently supporting her as she began removing her clothing piece by piece. I gently comforted her, hoping to help her relax. She let out a deep sigh, her conceit plainly fading. I knelt down to assist her in removing the remainder of her clothing. Then he rose and led her to the swiftly filling tub. I sat behind her, allowing her to rest between my knees and lean against me. She started crying, her cries deep and unrestrained. "What's the problem, honey?" I asked her. "Oh, Max, I really needed to see you this weekend. I accomplished something this week while you were away." That was incorrect. "I'm not sure if you'll still love me when I tell you." Now let's hear the narrative from Ella's point of view. "After you left last Sunday evening, I contacted Nina and discussed some ideas for a surprise birthday celebration for you. She told me to get some ideas together and we'd discuss them the next day at work. The next morning, I went into work at the diner. Nina told me that the previous evening after we had hung up, she and Ivo had been brainstorming ideas. Nina and Eva were an elderly Bosnian couple who owned the diner where Ella worked. They were in their late 60s throughout the day. As we worked, we discussed various birthday party ideas. After we closed for the day, we decided to go see Hanin, Eva's brother, and the Hilton Hotel's head chef. Nina planned to run a quick errand and meet us there. I rode over with Ivo, and Nina met us a few minutes later. We all went to Hannon's office and spent the next hour organizing the celebration. When we were finished, Nina left, and Ivo and I returned to the front, where the valet brought his car, drove me back to the diner, and I went home. We discussed all of the tiny details at work over the next week, and we were already ready on Thursday to hand it over and set it up for your birthday at the end of the month. At that time, she lost all of the calm she had achieved while telling me, and she melted down in my arms as I held her in the bathtub. She turned sideways, slid onto my lap, buried her head in the hollow of my neck, and wailed. I hugged and rocked her as she tried to calm down. "Go on, honey. What's got you so upset?" Everything had been so enjoyable and exciting. Nina and Ivo and I are planning our party. I truly wanted it to be the best one ever for you. You do not turn 40 every year. I hoped no one would remember. There's little likelihood of that. I've been thinking about what to do for several weeks, she told me. She tried to continue, but tears kept getting in the way of her words. The doorbell rang at approximately 1:30 a.m. on Friday. I didn't actually hear it, and then someone pounded on the door crying, "Police!" I dashed to the door, assuming something had happened to you. I opened the door, and the screen was jerked open, and a man pushed me back into the home, knocking me to the ground. I wasn't sure who it was at first because he was ranting and clearly inebriated. He grabbed my arm, pulled me to my feet, and slapped me. I eventually learned that was Carl Ginger's ex-husband. He was calling me a cheating 304 and other terrible terms. He informed me he saw me and that man leaving the Hilton on Tuesday afternoon. He threatened to tell the girls that I was a cheating 304 and that if I didn't pay him $10,000, he would tell you that I had cheated, with images to prove it. He showed me a photo of me and Avo getting into Ava's car. I was so astonished that I couldn't think clearly. All I could think about was how the party would be ruined. I wasn't thinking clearly. I attempted to defend myself by hitting him, but he smacked me in the face and knocked me down again. I felt afraid. He became angry and grabbed me while yelling awful things. I whacked him in the leg with my heel, causing him to fall backward. His rage seemed to subside, and he dashed for the door just as he was leaving. He grabbed me aggressively, pushed me onto the porch, and attempted to force a kiss. I bit his bottom lip hard enough that it bled. He pulled away, got into his car, and drove off, shaken. I returned inside and broke down. I am unsure about what to do next. All I could think about was how this would spoil your party. Honey, why didn't you simply call the police to report the assault and attempted assault? I see now that this is what I should have done. I was just so emotional that I couldn't think clearly. And I went to the restroom to assess the damage and see if I could conceal it well enough to go to work. The next morning, I told Nina what had happened, and she told me to notify you as soon as you called Friday morning. I was eager to see you and wanted to tell you everything that had transpired. Nina persuaded me that the celebration wasn't important in light of what had happened. I felt sad about it, but I knew I needed to tell you. Then, when you didn't come home and I couldn't reach you, I believe I panicked, worried about what Carl could try. I carefully began tending to her, noting the marks from the severe treatment she had received. She had applied makeup to disguise the bruising on her face and chest, but some remained evident, indicating healing with a yellowish-blue tint. They must have been far worse when they were new. I promised myself he'd answer for every one of them. I embraced her in my arms and held her while telling her, "I love you, Ella." I apologize for causing you worry. I should have leased a car and returned home. Let's get out and go to bed. I want to express how much I love you. We got out and cleaned each other off, and then I brought her to the bed and had her sit on its edge. I sat beside him, and we kissed and lay back down in each other's arms. We had been in love for 19 years, and knew we would continue to love each other for the rest of the week. I kept near to both my house and Ella. I wanted to be present in case something came up. After the first week, everything seemed to settle down around our house. Ella would rarely let me leave her sight. I called in on Monday, took a week off, and planned to spend it with my sweetheart. I also wanted to be present in case shit for brains turned up and attempted to start something. I guess we didn't need to worry. We saw no sign of him. About 6 weeks had passed. I was at work when FedEx delivered a package to my office that I needed to sign for. I signed it and returned it to the office, closing the door. I opened it to discover a letter from an attorney informing me that Leo had died and that, in accordance with his last will and testament, the attorney was carrying out his final intentions, along with a copy of the will and a tiny parcel. I opened the package and found a little cassette tape player. I figured it was probably best to listen to it in the car on the way home from work. I got out the will and read it. The will specified who received what from the estate of Leo and Doris Farmer. His and Doris's extended relatives all received an equal share of the estate's monetary value. It appears that they were quite prosperous farmers. Several millions of money had been divided and distributed. One stipulation was that no family would receive any money if they opposed the second portion of the will, which stated that the farms were handed to me, if any of them disputed it. Then they all got nothing, while I got everything. Wow. I had not expected this at all. I went to the door and told my secretary that I was leaving early and not to bother me unless there was an emergency. I went out to my car, hopped in, inserted the cassette into the car player, and clicked play. The first section of the tape was shit for brains, as he confessed his screwed-up plan to collect money for me via L.A. to get it. After the confession, Leo went into depth about how my situation was resolved. Finally, it ended. Max. See if you can get Clara and drive her to the farm. She deserves a wonderful place to retire. To enjoy decent fishing, you must first supply the pond. It will take 1 or 2 years to fill. I wish I could fish with you. Make sure you burn this tape. Be joyful, and take Ella with you to see your friend Leo. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.